All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to the Holler. TNHoller.com is where you can find us at the TN Holler on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, all that good stuff. We also have hollers hollering all across the state thanks to your support. Really appreciate it. Memphis Holler, Murray Holler, Tri-Cities, Knoxville, Chattanooga, and all that good stuff. If you want a holler hat like the one I'm wearing, go to tnholler.com and grab one. We appreciate it. And then quick shout out to Elisa Parker. If you're buying or selling a home in Middle Tennessee, do it through her. If you need a lawyer, Abby Rubenfeld. And then we also have gayveterans.us is now sponsoring us. All right, let's get to it. We are joined today by Representative Congressman Steve Cohen, who is the only Democratic congressman out of Tennessee now that we have been gerrymandered all to hell. Congressman Cohen, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. Up and Adam.
You're up and Adam. All right.
On my internet, my smartphone.
Yes.
Trump pardoned a man who had his mother went to $1 million per person fundraising dinner at Mar-a-Lago, and boom, he was pardoned for tax evasion, which he was convicted of in December, and he had $4.4 million in restitution that he now doesn't have to pay, and he's not going to have to report for an 18-month prison sentence. It was handed down just 12 days earlier. It's good to know the president. And now that Justice Roberts has said that anything he does in his official duties, which is pardons, he can't be sued for, he can't be criminally liable for. So he just can sell pardons, and that's what he's doing.
So, Congressman Cohen, I'm starting to suspect you might think there's a connection between money going into the president's personal finances and the actions that he's taken as president. Is that a fair assumption?
It's a fair assumption, and it should be a fair assumption from anyone in America. I mean, the fact is he's the most open, notorious, and just criminal in American history. He's a president who's made more money already out of being president than all the other presidents combined. I guess even the vice presidents.
Well, so one of the things that you said there, you said open, right? And in Speaker Johnson's interview this past Sunday, he seemed to use that as kind of a defense of the president. He said that because he does everything out in the open, that somehow that makes it okay. What do you think about that general line of defense? You know, basically they're saying, well, Biden, you know, the things he was accused of, which were not proven, the Biden bribery stuff, well, that was a secret, but this, because he's doing it out in the open, that makes all of this corruption okay.
Supreme Court opinion was ruling has just gone into effect. He's the first president that could do things in the open and be wrongful, and it doesn't harm him. So there's no reason not to. Chief Justice gave him permission. Said basically, you're immune from prosecution or civil liability as long as it pertains to your official duties. So he's just open and notorious. And what Johnson said was basically playing his constituents for chumps, giving them some lame BS reasoning for corruption and allowed. You know, Speaker Johnson said when he got elected, and I know him pretty well. I was the chairman of the subcommittee that he was the ranking member on, so we sat shoulder to shoulder for several years. I've known him and known people like him all my political life. Well-meaning, but kind of on the spectrum. No, I would say he's not autistic. That's not right, but he's out there. And he's totally into religion and having religion govern the government. And he said that to know his philosophy is just to read the Bible, with certain things like Matthew taken out of it.
Well, so, okay, when I have this conversation with you,
obviously First Timothy's not him either.
Right. Well, when I have this conversation with people, right, like I talk to some Republicans, and you know, their immediate defense for this corruption, which, I mean, it's just so blatant. Like the crypto stuff is so blatant, and there are actually some Democrats that are helping with that, which is upsetting.
That was disgusting. I tried to see the 16 senators who voted for the genius bill.
The genius bill, which is Haggerty's bill. Yeah.
They bought people with crypto. Crypto was the #1 contributor to campaigns this past fall.
Right.
Why do they do it? They want due process? Huh.
Right. No, exactly. And that's, I think, a big part of why a lot of those tech billionaires were on Trump's side. But when you're talking to rank and file Republicans, right? And this is what happens when I try to talk to them about this corruption. Their immediate response is just to say, well, Biden did it too. Even though that wasn't proven out, and even what they accused Biden of pales in comparison to what we know Trump is actually doing out in the open. Like, how do you break through that, defense mechanism that they have, which is basically just to say, well, everybody's corrupt, so Trump's corruption is okay.
They're part of a cult. They don't want to admit it. And for them to admit there's some fault with their chosen leader means they made a mistake. And they don't want to admit they made a mistake.
So it's that simple.
I think
All right. Well, okay. So let's talk about the bill that just passed, if you would, for a minute. It just passed the House. It was, the big, beautiful bill, which we know is not beautiful at all.
The big ugly bill.
Big ugly bill. It's, close to $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts. There's also Medicare cuts in there. There's also ACA cuts in there, all while pushing a multi-trillion-dollar tax cut, mainly for the rich, that explodes the debt and deficits that they claim to care about. What would you say to people, who still believe that Republicans care about the debt and deficits and, don't necessarily have it sink in yet that this is a transfer of trillions of dollars from the poor to the rich?
I don't like the cuts they made. I don't like the elimination of the Department of Energy or Education, which Congress should have created and should have had something to do with. In fact, Jimmy Carter created both of them. But I didn't like them, and I didn't like cutting out USAID, which helped us internationally. Soft power did a lot of good, saved a lot of people's lives in South Africa with PEPFAR, the best Republican foreign policy program ever done by George Bush, helping people with AIDS and HIV, feeding people in South Africa and the Sahel, where there's starvation, children starving, people dying, people are dying. Bill Gates put it best: the richest man in the world, Mr. Doge, is killing millions of the poorest people in the world. And he did it by cutting out the food programs and letting the food that was shipped just waste in cargo ships or warehouses, and cutting off future food. So it's the epitome of ignorance and not they don't care. They don't care about other people. They just care about the rich. And this bill, they cared about. So while I don't like those cuts, they could have done those cuts and not given the $1 trillion plus to the wealthy, and they could have given that money to debt relief. But giving money to the wealthy people, $400,000 a year income and more, was more important than reducing the debt. The debt grew the most it's ever grown under Trump 1, and it's going to grow again under Trump 2, at least $5 trillion over a period of like 10 years. They don't care about the debt. It's an excuse. They care about giving money to their fellow rich friends. The biggest tax increase in our country's history was the tariffs. That's right in your face. It's just not spelled out, TAX. Tariffs are taxes, and they're put on you. And Trump kept trying to say, I don't know if he's that stupid or if he thinks his constituents are stupid, but kept saying, oh, this isn't a tax. The countries pay the tariff. The countries don't pay the tariff. The purchasers of the products pay the tariff.
It seems like there's
adding it to their customers' costs. That's Republicans are supposed to tell business what the price should be. It's unbelievable.
So is there a way for Democrats to take what they're doing in terms of, exposing themselves as not actually caring about the debt and deficits and use that in the future to push some bills and programs that actually help regular people? I guess what I'm saying is, for instance, not Medicare for all or whatever, but programs that help people tend to be dismissed as we can't afford them because of debts and the deficit. And this seems like they're just showing us that when it's convenient, they don't actually care about that.
Oh, they don't care about it at all. They do care about, but some of them care about. Some of them care about the deficit. But then they came in at the last minute when Trump gave. I don't know what he gave them. One guy gave what was his name, Cloud. He's got a factory in his district that produces silencers for pistols.
Oh, is that what that was? I gotcha. Okay.
So they got Cloud, who was Mr. Anti-Deficit budget hawk, by taking the tax and the regulation off of gun silencers.
Oh, so the silencers was a giveaway to a guy whose vote they needed?
Yep, Cloud.
Gotcha. See, I didn't understand that. All right. One other thing I wanted to ask you about while I have you here, you mentioned richest man in the world and Doge and the cuts that they were making. Do you have any thoughts on what's going on with XAI and Musk in your district?
I've watched it fairly closely, maybe not as attentively as somebody who's in local government, because I've been dealing with federal issues and been in Washington a lot, but I don't trust Musk at all. He lied about the reconciliation bill, the continuing resolution that we passed in January, and lied about it entirely. It said that we were given some hundreds of millions of dollars to the District of Columbia to build a football stadium, which wasn't true. It said we were voting ourselves a pay raise of $50 million a year, which was not true. He had several things he said that weren't true. He said we were giving condoms to Gaza, to Hamas, $10 million worth of condoms. I don't know.
50.
It's 50 million. I don't know how many people they think they've got down there that Hamas is screwing in the tunnels. It's a very romantic atmosphere. But regardless, it was Gaza and Mozambique where they've got an HIV problem.
Right.
And they didn't know the difference or care about the difference. He's not particularly versed in government, not versed at all. He's just good at acting like, what was his name? Edward Scissorhands, or whatever his first name was, Scissorhands, taking that
yeah.
He looked like an idiot. And then he's jumping up and down. He's got some problems. And I just think that he's making money out of the government, the billions of dollars. And he's in with Trump. He's going to do Starlink. He's going to do the Golden Dome.
Yep.
That's crazy, too. We don't need a multi-billion-dollar Golden Dome. He said, we don't need to worry about Ukraine. That's Europe's problem. He said, we've got a great ocean. That's Trump. We've got a great ocean between us and Europe. Well, if we've got this ocean that protects us from Russia, why are we building this billions of dollars worth of Iron Dome? That's not to stop the Swedes from shooting missiles at us.
Why do you think some of these local leaders seem to be trusting Musk with this XAI thing, even as the community is, up in arms about the environmental implications?
Yeah, back to XAI. So I don't trust him. I do think it's certainly going to add to the pollution in the air of the people in Southwest Tennessee, Southwest Memphis, who've had a lot already, and they'll have more. The carbon, the turbines will emit carbon dioxide and other noxious chemicals. And they were using more than 15, I think, when they said they were just using 15 on a temporary basis. I think they kind of
35.
They claim they scale back to 15, but you can't trust them.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people think, including the mayor, who I think is doing a good job, think Memphis needs new business, and we do need new business. We need to grow, and this is a business that paid $15 or $20 million, I think, in taxes, property taxes, last year. Now, whether the property will depreciate, and so they won't pay as much in the future. And they don't employ that many people. The employment is very minimal, just some janitors and a few security people. That's the whole idea of artificial intelligence. They got these machines that do it all, and they don't need too many people around, few technicians. But it's not going to help that much. They bought the second site on the border of Mississippi and Tennessee, and that's the one where they got to put some more energy. And when they finish doing that, they're going to require about 40% of the energy that's produced in Memphis. I guarantee you, we're going to have blackouts, and people will suffer. And they can pay higher rates, which they should, but they can't. TVA's got to levy those higher rates, and TVA doesn't have they've only got four commissioners, 4 board members out of 9, because Trump's fired the others. So they're incapable of passing the resolution they need to pass to have a higher rate for XAI. And they're probably going to keep it that way until XAI can get going, and they'll say it's too late to change the rate. But I think that's the reason why the president cut them back to 4, so they couldn't pass anything. And that's probably from Musk.
I agree. Yeah. I think a lot of people suspect that the changes at TVA were coming from Musk and had a lot to do with XAI. So, I think people are right to be concerned about that. Just as a last thing before I let you go here, I wanted to ask you about yesterday in Nashville. Your colleague Andy Ogles held a press conference inside a closed Capitol. Here were people protesting outside. There's a closed Capitol because it was Memorial Day, and Andy thought it was a good idea on Memorial Day to essentially hijack the day to push his anti-immigrant agenda and, announce basically an investigation into Freddie O'Connell, Nashville's mayor. How do you feel about Andy Ogles having a press conference on Memorial Day inside a closed Capitol, hiding from his constituents and announcing what's obviously a grandstanding investigation into the mayor?
So he had a press conference in the Capitol. The press was there, but not citizenry.
Correct. I wasn't allowed in either, so he only chose certain press. And there was a locked door. They wouldn't let people in. Here's me at the locked door, and Ogles is taunting people posting this stuff. He also had a lackey that was videotaping them and laughing through the door at constituents who wanted to get in. And he basically said Freddie was standing with rapists and murderers, even though all Freddie did was say, if ICE is coming to Nashville, he wants information about who they're snatching up off the streets, which we also know is mostly people who do not have criminal histories. So yeah, I mean, it felt like a pretty gross disrespect of what Memorial Day is supposed to be about. And I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about all of the immigration stuff going on, especially here in Tennessee.
Well, what's going on with the Capitol. Governor Lee's responsible for the Capitol, so he's just as guilty as Ogles in contributing to it. As far as the immigration stuff, yeah, the mayor, I don't know what's going on there exactly, but they're going to investigate anybody who doesn't go along with whatever ICE tells them to do. They arrested a judge in Minnesota, I believe it was. Maybe it was Wisconsin. I think it was Minnesota. And they'll go after any Democrat they can. Meanwhile, they pardoned Brian Kelsey. Brian Kelsey said the pardon he owed it to Andy Ogles, and Andy Ogles took it to Trump. Well, Ogles might need a pardon himself because they're investigating him and stuff, but he'll get pardoned too. Yesterday, I was saying at the beginning of the show how Trump pardoned this wealthy fella that had tax evasion charges. His mother was big on getting Biden's granddaughter's diary and give it out to the public or something. But she also gave him $1 million and raised him a bunch of money. But 2 days ago, he pardoned some elected official. I think it was a sheriff in Virginia who had been convicted. He pardons people that are Republicans just because of who they are. And a lot of them are financial criminals that owe lots in restitution to the American public. Others have violated their oath of office, but that's what Trump does. He violates his oath of office. He doesn't believe in carrying out the Constitution against all folks, foreign and domestic, who threaten our country. He's one of them. What he did on January 6th was the most reprehensible thing that's ever been done to this nation. He said in many speeches that what happened in Afghanistan when we were trying to help people get out, and about 16 or 14 or 17 of our soldiers died, he said it was the most embarrassing and the worst day in the Americans' history. Well, I think January 6th was the worst day by far, when a president sent 1,600 people or more up to the Capitol saying, if you don't fight like hell, you won't have a government. And they screamed, hang Mike Pence. And where's Nancy Pelosi? And they took over the killed cops and beat cops and disfigured cops. And he pardoned every one of them on the first day in office because they were his people. And they gave $5 million to Ashley Babbitt's family. She was an insurrectionist who invaded the Capitol and who allowed herself to be picked up and thrown through a broken window that they broke to go into the speaker's lobby and to take over the House floor. And the officer who shot her did his job in protecting the Capitol. He's crazy.
It seems fair to wonder if a lot of these people that were pardoned might not be behind these masked ICE agents that are out there, wearing not real uniforms and vigilante, justice, grabbing people off the streets. I think a lot of people are wondering if, basically these militias and the people that were at the Capitol that day aren't the ones that are now kind of like forming this American Gestapo and grabbing people.
Well, they could be. He's told them stand down but stand by. That was right during one of his debates or interviews. He's all for those people, and they're on his team, and he'll pardon any one of them for anything they do, so they don't mind doing whatever they want to do. They'll beat up cops again.
How nervous should people be?
There's a plaque that was designed and finished to honor the police for defending the Capitol, and some of them giving their lives, etc. Johnson will not put it up. He's got it in the basement, and he will not put it up in the Capitol. Yep. We've got plaques to the two guards who were killed. Bill Frisk went in and did some emergency medical care, but they died defending the Capitol. We've got plaques to them, and we've got plaques to other police heroes. And there was an officer who was killed at the gate coming in on the Senate side by some crazy person about 2 years ago. There's a plaque for him at that gate. He won't put up a plaque to the police, Capitol Police that protected us. It's just everything's topsy-turvy. And he's putting people in charge of offices that don't believe in the offices, and their job is to destroy it and get rid of it. Social Security, they're getting rid of people so they can make it more difficult for people to get their Social Security because they want to privatize it. And he's putting a guy from Wall Street in charge of Social Security.
That's right. You know, how concerned are you that we're in a place that we might not be able to come back from? You know, we see hidden in this provision is one bill that basically makes it so that the Supreme Court's orders don't get enforced. He's got all these emergency powers we're seeing where, you know, it's hard to miss the irony of, you know, the same party that complains all the time about Governor Lee and the emergency powers that he had during COVID. Now they want to give Trump every emergency power in the book to do whatever he wants, and they seem to have no problem with it. So, you know, between the emergency powers, martial law, you know, the Supreme Court, his immunity, you know, how concerned are you we're in a place that we can't actually come back from?
Well, as far as emergency powers, I've had a bill for over 6 years, started back when I guess Obama was president. No, I guess Trump was president then. That's been 5 years, probably when Trump was president. But it was about emergency powers and saying that they had to come back to the Congress every 30 days for renewal or they expired. And I finally, after a time, I got Chip Roy to say he liked the idea, and he became a co-sponsor. And then the Republicans took over the House, and so he became the sponsor, and he was going to do something with it. But because Biden wasn't president any longer and Trump was president, he dropped his interest in it. So we haven't passed it, of course, because they knew what they were going to do. Project 2025 spelled it out for them. It's the emergency powers is awful, and you know, I don't know. We come back from it. There's a lot of brain talent's being lost. It's their institutional knowledge. People got out. They didn't want to work for this government. They took the leave, or they got fired and dismissed. Scientists have been released from the NIH. He's saying he's going to take $3 billion from Harvard and put it in technical schools around the country. Well, he can put money into technical schools, but the money that going to Harvard was to look for cures for cancer and Alzheimer's. And we're going to be further and further away from cures for our real Department of Defense. I mean, we need an Army. We need a Navy. We don't need a parade, but we need an Army and a Navy and an Air Force. And now we've got the Space Force. But the likelihood of us dying from something Russia does, or China, or North Korea, pretty slim. Our military is sufficient to hold them back. But the odds of dying from heart disease or stroke or cancer or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, it's pretty good. The NIH is our Department of Defense, and he's taking money from it. He's firing the scientists, the generals, and he's putting this further back. Each and every person, red or blue, Trump or non-Trump, MAGA or non-MAGA, their lives are going to be, quite a few of them, shorter because of the lack of research that's done at Harvard and other institutions of higher education. The other night I was watching on my smartphone. There was something on there about, I guess it was George Wallace. No, it wasn't on my smartphone. It was on CNN. They had a special on David Frost, and he has different episodes, and one of them had George Wallace in it. George Wallace's campaign in 1970 sounded just like Donald Trump. He was talking about the people in the Spiro Agnew. No, excuse me, it was Spiro. Well, Wallace sounded like him too with all his racial stuff. But Spiro Agnew was on there too, and that was about the John Lennon portion and what Agnew's attitudes. But Agnew was talking about the elites and the professors and all these people, and they're the problem. They're the problem. Same stuff that Trump is spouting. He's Nixon, Agnew, and together, and George Wallace, he comes right out of the 70s. He stole Make America Great Again from Reagan. But Reagan was smart enough, and I saw this on one of my reels I watched, great speech about how tariffs are awful. And Reagan read this, and you Google it easy enough, Reagan on tariffs, that tariffs look good on the front end. They're wonderful, but they look good, but they turn out to where it makes every business dependent on the government. They lose their innovation and their new ideas and opportunities to grow, and they grow stagnant. The taxes come on, the tariffs come on, prices go up, people stop buying goods, and you have a recession. Reagan knew it. Trump doesn't care, because all he cares about is the front end thing looking strong and being able to make a deal. Do you think it's any coincidence that he's got tariffs talks with Vietnam, and he's got 3 18-hole golf courses and a big resort plan there? And it was just brought up, Eric went over there to sell it. Donald Jr. was going around the Middle East selling golf courses and office towers and all right before Trump got there. They have an advanced team to go, here's our deal we want. And then they come in and they give them something. They get the airplane. I mean, that's absurd. It's embarrassing. The United States of America's got a plane from Qatar. And that plane, it's going to take forever time and money to make it equipped to be a military plane to carry the president. He doesn't care. He wants it on his property. He said most people come to Reagan's library to see the plane. He wants something to attract people to his library.
Absolutely.
They're going to probably sell meme coins of Melania nude. I wouldn't put it back.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that this guy doesn't do anything that doesn't enrich him personally. And, the fact that there are still people out there that don't understand that. I mean, imagine for a second if you were like, all right, I have this idea. I want to bring it to Trump. And you walk in there and you're going to pitch him an idea that doesn't benefit him personally. You think he's going to listen to that? That's all this guy cares about.
It's all he cares about. And you look at, he talks about Russia. He says yesterday, he's right. Putin's gone crazy. Putin's been crazy. Putin's a war criminal and a genocider. So he launches this unbelievably large attack of drones and missiles at Ukrainian cities and kills 18 or 20 people, several of which are children, destroys buildings and civilian properties. And Trump says how awful it is. But what does he do? He acts like the military's got bone spurs and they can't respond.
Right. No, I know. There's no question. Well, Congressman Cohen, thank you for coming on here. I appreciate you talking to us as always. Thanks for fighting the good fight up there. Definitely,
got a lot of viewers and a lot of people follow you and they post on the social media, on X or Blue Sky, and that helps. We can do legislation, but it's not going to pass because we don't have a majority. We can do litigation, which we do, and a lot of the court cases have been successful, and they've been successful by rulings by judges of all 6 former presidents, Democrat and Republican, and they've been all over the country. It's not just one place. And we could do mobilization, getting groups together. We've got to keep the ideas going, and what you're doing, Justin, is very important to this mobilization effort and getting people to know the truth so that they can stay activated and in protest. And a lot of protests can make a difference. It does make a difference, even with somebody as venal as Donald Trump.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, we have seen pushback work. It seems to be part of why Elon Musk is now tucking tail and running back to Tesla. So thanks for what you're doing, and appreciate you coming on here as always.
You're very welcome. Take care, my friend.
Take care. So that is Congressman Steve Cohen coming on here to talk about Trump's corruption, the big ugly bill that just passed, and a couple other things. Thank you for watching. I just wanted to, before I let you guys go, talk a little bit about, I see you guys. Thank you for posting, and definitely let us know where you're watching from too. That's always interesting. Harriet, good to see you. I just want to talk a little bit about yesterday because that was ugly. That was really ugly. That Andy Ogle's press conference inside a closed Capitol to push his anti-immigrant hate and locking the door, we weren't allowed in there. You see me right there. We were knocking on the door to come in. They only let certain press in there. Yet again, the press just walks in and doesn't seem to care that they pick and choose who they want to let into these press conferences. And, I want to point out that the coverage of things like this, when he goes in and he does this and he has his little stop the invasion hate fest inside the Capitol, the coverage of this, you have a choice to make. You could choose how to cover this. You don't have to give them the headlines and the coverage and the framing that they want. And when I see WSMV give him exactly the frame that he wants, talk about this investigation into Freddie O'Connell, talk about how the people outside were battering the windows. I mean, I was there. They were knocking on the windows because they're inside a closed Capitol on Memorial Day, a day that is supposed to be reserved for honoring fallen soldiers. And they are desecrating it by having this, hateful press conference inside a closed Capitol. That's the story. The story is that Andy Ogles is hiding from his constituents. He won't have a town hall. And he is hijacking a day for fallen troops to push his hate and call for a grandstanding investigation into the mayor of Nashville for who hasn't done anything wrong, who all he did was say, we want to know when ICE is coming and we want to know who you're taking off the streets. And they are not violent criminals. There's a few violent criminals. Yes, take them off the streets. But for the most part, of the 200 people they grabbed, 5 of them had violent pasts. So that is not what's happening here. You've got an entire community living in fear over these raids, over the terror that is being imposed on these communities. And instead of answering questions about it, he's holding this grandstanding town hall in a closed Capitol on Memorial Day. That's the story. And just to focus on the coverage of it for a minute, it's really disappointing to see the media give them the headlines that they want and fall right into their trap every single time. And it's not just WSMV. WKRN did the same thing. Didn't say a single word about the protest outside. Didn't say a single word about the fact that Andy Ogles is calling for investigations into, Rep. Afton Bain and Mayor Freddie O'Connell. Meanwhile, he himself had an FBI investigation squashed by Trump into his campaign finances, which he has lied about repeatedly. And God only knows what else this guy's lied about. We know he lied on his resume. He lied about being an economist. He lied about being law enforcement. So there's a lot of ways to tell this story. And to see how many outlets fell into the trap of giving Ogles exactly what he wanted here with this gross authoritarian press conference that just feeds hate towards immigrants, to see how many outlets continue to push their lines, it's really disappointing. And what I always say about this is you really only have 2 choices as the media. You have 2 choices. You can either push back against this stuff, this authoritarianism, this fascism, this hate, or you can help it along. There's no third option. You don't get to sit on the sidelines. You don't get to play stenographer and then act like you're just doing your job. No. You have 2 options. You're either helping it along or you're pushing back against it and calling it out. You don't have to be, out there with a sign, but you can call it out. There's ways you can call it out. And you can do that through framing. You can do that through headlines. So you have options. And I just want to point to one outlet that kind of at least came close to framing this in a way that is at least giving, some lip service to the protest outside. This is News Channel 9. And they said protesters clashed with Ogles on Memorial Day. They're at least pointing out that Memorial Day was happening. Most of the other outlets didn't even mention that this was him hijacking Memorial Day in a closed Capitol, taking away from the holiday, taking away from the soldiers. Other outlets didn't even mention it. News Channel 9 mentions it, and they say in their lead, Memorial Day, a day usually marked by somber reflection, took on a very different tone. Now, that doesn't go far enough for me, for my taste, but at least it mentions that Ogles was hijacking Memorial Day, and at least it focuses on the protest outside. And, in today's corporate media landscape, that's probably about as good as we're going to do. But if you put that up next to the way WSMV and WKRN framed it, just Ogles zeroing in on Nashville's mayor for conduct during ICE operations. Like, it treats that as though it's a legitimate investigation, which we all know it is not. We all know Freddie did not violate any law. You know that. You're the media. You know that. And you are helping it seem as though he did with a headline like this or a headline like this. So you are playing a part in this by covering it this way. You are playing a part. You are complicit. Not to mention the fact that you're not speaking up at all about us getting kept out of these press conferences. At least help me get in there so I can ask the questions if you won't do this. It's very frustrating. And, you know, I'm not saying that you're in an easy spot. Nobody's in an easy spot. None of us are in an easy spot. But you can do more than you're doing, and you can do more than help grease the skids for this stuff. And then speaking of being complicit, one other person that I just want to point out was extremely complicit yesterday was Gino Bolso. Gino Bolso was standing behind Andy Ogles when he was asked, does everybody deserve due process? Now, we all know, having looked at this for weeks on end now, that everybody gets due process, even non-citizens in this country. That's what makes us who we are. And then here was Ogles asked that very question, and he
they've been choosing a protected process. Do you think every person who's arrested in a local ice raid has the right to due process?
No. So if you're a non-citizen, under the current law, you can be removed in an expeditious manner. All right, with that.
Okay, so Ogles is wrong. Obviously, he's not a lawyer, and he used a big word, expeditious manner. He probably Googled that or, found it in a glossary somewhere, but that's not true. You get due process in this country. And don't just believe me on this, believe Bolso, who was standing right behind him when he said this. And this was Bolso when we asked him about it in April.
What your feeling is about the way that these deportations are being handled?
It's not something that I've studied, Justin. Obviously, you're familiar with the 14th Amendment. It's got a due process clause in Section 1. There are both procedural and substantive components to due process. Due process applies not just to citizens, but to persons, so it applies to citizens and non-citizens alike. So,
Bolso says it applies to citizens and non-citizens alike. Bolso is a lawyer, so Bolso knows the truth. He knows that Andy Ogles was lying or wrong, whichever you want to characterize it as. And Bolso was standing right behind him when he said this yesterday. And this was right after Bolso had made this whole speech about how committed they are to the law and liberty. And then Ogles stands there and says, you know what? We will take your liberty away no matter what the law says. And Bolso said nothing. And so I just want to close by showing how obvious it is that Bolso knows what happened and knows how wrong it was, because watch Bolso after Andy says this yesterday.
No. So if you're a non-citizen, under the current law, you can be removed in an expeditious manner.
I love that. Gino, we all saw your face, buddy. We all saw that reaction. Look, he's like, that's not right. That's not correct. But did he say anything? No, Gino, you didn't say anything. Well, Gino, it's not too late. It's not too late. I asked you in our DMs, you follow us, Gino, and we asked you, do you have any thoughts on Andy Ogles mischaracterizing what the law says about due process? So it's not too late. You can say something. You can say something. You can still believe that, undocumented people should be taken out of this country, regardless if they have any criminal records or not. We can have good faith. I'm not saying good faith. We can argue about that. But we all know, they deserve due process. We all know, snatching people off the streets and whisking them to Louisiana or potentially El Salvador or now even Libya or other far off places, potentially to die or be put into slavery, which happens in places like Libya to the imprisoned, to migrants. Google it. They're ending lives over this without due process. And we know, Gino, that you know that they are entitled to due process in this country. And it's not too late to say something and do the right thing. You're a lawyer. And that would actually go a long way if Gino Bolso were to say something about Andy Ogles and what he said yesterday. But you won't. We all know you won't. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Congressman Cohen, for coming on here. Thank you to everybody for watching. Keep following the holler, and we'll see you next time.